some of each show, and this guy I know and his daddy, Lanny Sinkin, is, and I have to read this so that you'll be prepared what he's going to say, even though you may know it. Lanny Sinkin is Chief Advisor to the King. He currently serves as the Executive Director of Solar San Antonio. Do I get this again? No. Solar San Antonio! He lived in Hawaii for 17 years, and during that time he worked closely with people there in the sovereignty movement to restore the nation of Hawaii, and with an ancient religion emerging after hiding for more than 100 years. Lanny Sinkin currently serves as Chief Advisor to the man that thousands of people believe is the king to restore the Hawaiian kingdom. Please welcome Lanny Sinkin!
Mahalo nui loa. That means thank you very much. I did live in Hawaii for 17 years and got to know many of the people active in the sovereignty movement and became very involved with them. And this is a little overview of their story. That is the beginning of a chant that students offer outside the room where learning will take place. The students request permission to enter, the teacher grants permission, the entire experience is approached with the greatest respect and as a sacred obligation. That respect and sacredness is the main characteristic of the Hawaiian civilization. That civilization achieved a pinnacle of expression over thousands of years in Polynesia. The goddess Pele created the lands that would be the stepping stones to the stars. The Kanaka Maoli lived in balanced harmony with their environment and had very sophisticated rules governing that relationship. Fish were raised in offshore ponds whose rock walls stretched for miles enclosing the ocean, and the fish could not be taken during their spawning season because the supply for future generations had to be maintained. The Hawaiians could read the stars, currents, waves, and clouds to guide their canoes across thousands of miles of open ocean to land precisely on their island destinations. Then came the Europeans. They failed to recognize the Hawaiians' very sophisticated scientific understanding, social systems, medicinal skills, and economic structures. They saw only savages to be manipulated. They brought with them diseases that decimated the Hawaiian population. The Ali'i, or rulers of Hawaii, sought to maintain their civilization in the face of the challenges presented by the Ha'oris, or foreigners. The Europeans provided a great chief, Kamehameha, with guns that gave him an advantage over other chiefs. Kamehameha used that superiority to conquer all the other islands and create the Kingdom of Hawaii. King Kamehameha I was also the last ruler to honor the ancient religion by establishing a temple to the god Lono at his political headquarters. The missionaries converted the Hawaiian political leadership to Christianity and began disassembling the Hawaiian civilization. The missionaries taught the new Christians that the practitioners of the ancient religion were agents of the devil. Christian Hawaiians hunted down and killed the traditional kahunas. At the Battle of Kaloko, a Hawaiian Christian army defeated a Hawaiian traditional army, and 60,000 people died. The ancient religion went underground, abandoning the stone temples where they worshipped. The missionaries taught that hula was evil and succeeded in outlawing this most sacred expression of the connection between the earth and the spiritual realm. They outlawed the speaking of Hawaiian in schools. They converted the land system from common ownership to private parcels, destroying the sophisticated land management system that was the foundation of the Hawaiian economy. Queen Liliuokalani, the last queen of the Hawaiian kingdom, found herself surrounded with scheming foreigners determined to abolish the kingdom and annex the islands to the United States. Her effort to preserve her kingdom proved fruitless. With the help of the United States Minister to the Kingdom and the United States Marines, a small group of foreigners overthrew the kingdom government and began the effort to annex Hawaii to the United States. The Queen stepped down to avoid bloodshed and called upon the United States President to restore her to her throne. The President of the United States acknowledged the overthrow as an act of war against a friendly nation and called for restoration of the Queen to her throne. The annexationists refused. When an annexation bill was introduced in the United States Congress, more than 35,000 Hawaiians, almost the entire adult Hawaiian population, signed a petition opposing annexation. Their opposition was futile and Hawaii was annexed. The kingdom flag was lowered at the royal palace and the United States flag was raised. The lands belonging to the crown and the kingdom government were seized. Today those lands make up the public lands of the state of Hawaii. The missionaries and their descendants took much of the private land for themselves. Today, almost the entire island of Lanny is owned by one man, Mr. Lawrence Ellison, CEO of the Oracle Corporation and one of the wealthiest men in the world, has just purchased the island. Yet the Hawaiian civilization refused to die. From the day the Queen was overthrown, there have been those who worked to restore the nation. In the past few decades, that restoration effort produced a sovereignty movement that has opened Hawaiian language immersion schools, rebuilt fish ponds, brought back the hula, and otherwise begun to put the pieces of the Hawaiian civilization back together. Protests seeking restoration of the nation are a common occurrence. In 1993, the United States Congress passed and President Clinton signed a resolution formally apologizing to the Hawaiian people for the illegal overthrow of their government. No steps were taken to correct that injustice. The kupuna, the elders, are the repositories of wisdom in the Hawaiian community. They campaign for the day their nation will be restored and their wisdom respected once again. His Majesty King Nalikulau Palani is conducting a barefoot campaign to restore an independent Hawaiian nation. The odds against him are phenomenal. However, the endurance of the Hawaiian civilization, emerging from what can legitimately be called attempted genocide, suggests that the Kingdom of Hawaii may yet rejoin the community of nations. The King's personal seal is placed on this presentation as an expression of his aloha to everyone present. E ho mai ke hiki mai una mai e, o nao mea huna noi au, malohia. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai.
Thank you, Lanny. Okay, now, for those of us who know you as part of Solar San Antonio and as Bill Sinkin's son, and for those of you who come in and think, well, I thought he was going to talk about Solar San Antonio. This is about something to explain to people that whatever you're passionate about, whether it's part of your job or not, you can come up here and talk about it, or whatever you hate or whatever. This is more serious. It's a whole different thing that I thought you were going to talk about. How serious are you about this, and how involved were you in Hawaii?
I became involved with the king about 8 years ago. I helped to get him out of prison, where he'd been put for 24 years. He served 14 years of the sentence on a trumped-up charge, and I've been working with him ever since. There are thousands of people in Hawaii that are working to restore the nation. The 1993 resolution by the United States Congress formally apologizing for the overthrow really set off the sovereignty movement in a big way. So it's real.
Well, now, and you lived there. What were you doing in your day job before you got into this? Did you go there for the pot?
No, I was on Hawaii, not Maui Wowie. Actually, I didn't have a day job in Hawaii. That was part of the beauty of living there. You never knew from one day to the next what you'd be doing. So I did some litigation on behalf of the whales. I sued the U.S. Navy 5 times over their testing of sonar on the whales. We worked on all kinds of projects to rebuild the nation, restoring fish ponds and trying to get taro fields back in. So it's a full-time and a half job just being Hawaiian these days.
All right, well, give him a hand. I can ask him a lot more questions. Thank you very much.